it's so important that we start and that we keep going. Because, you know, great guitar players are just people that started and they weren't good when they started, but they've just been doing it for so long. And so you take the person that's like, I tried meditation and it didn't work. Yeah, I tried this stuff and I couldn't do it. It's because there's real things that come up that are objections, and your ego is the biggest one.
Awesome. Are you ready to just dive on in?
You got it.
Beautiful. Well, in that case, hey everyone, Andrew here, otherwise known as the guy who wrote the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read. And as usual, as I always say in these conversations, I almost feel like a broken record. I am pumped. I am super excited because I have, I guess, stumbled onto who I feel is going to be a really perfect guest for you guys, because this gentleman is a success story in and of itself and in and of himself before ever finding my book. But at the same token, he was really able to appreciate and spot certain things from the book as keys to success. And I figured, what better example than someone who's kind of, you know, felt his way through to success, but also gotten maybe hopefully a few aha moments as to why or how it might have happened. And really just to present that to you guys through a conversation that will hopefully inspire and help you as well. This gentleman, I mean, we'll go into further details and he can say it better than me, but he's a recording artist and singer who's done over 50 million in sales and streams of music, which is amazing in the sense that, like, that's reaching people on a completely new level that, you know, you really got to respect. And it really says a lot to the level of talent, but also the level of commitment to his craft. And I would hope the level of access to the law of attraction and any other principles that may have helped along the way. But I'll let him confirm for that. I don't want to put words in his mouth. So without further ado, Steve Acho, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to my YouTube channel.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so pumped and so funny. We were diving into this conversation and we were just 5 minutes before I was like, hey, let's get started.
Yeah.
You were already making all these brilliant points. And, you know, it's so cool for me to always, you know, kind of get in touch or be reached out to by a reader that's had such a profound level of success. And we know that's like surface level, but there's also like the internal. And I'm sure, you know, you've kind of gone through the process of achieving both and going through both successes, failures, and things of that nature.
For sure.
I'm curious, and we're going to bounce all over the place in this conversation, I'm sure.
Sure.
But what do you think, you know, obviously you've reached a level of success. What do you think was your number one internal obstacle on the way to doing that?
Obstacle to getting to success. Well, I think that, let me answer it the other way. One of the reasons I think why I've been a relatively successful independent music artist, I mean, I've performed in every country. I was on TV in Japan. I have, as you said, 50 million sales and streams, and I'm completely independent, and always have been. I don't have a record label. I don't know anyone big in the music industry other than people that I've worked with. And it's almost, I think, because the more I started to read and learn about the industry, the more it scared me. I really thought, like, oh my God, I am a really small fish in a really big sea. And I almost feel like, had I known, if I wasn't so completely naive, you know, and unaware of how things worked, there's no way that I would have gone forward and said, like, hey, there's no rules anymore. I can put my music out there. I can cover a song and Billy Joel will say he liked my cover of his song. That's crazy, right? Like, and even just to keep going and keep performing and keep putting on shows, just in kind of the music portion of my life, I think it would have held me back, and I would have had that kind of imposter syndrome that a lot of people do, whether they are successful or not. Like, that, who am I to do this when, you know, 0.01% of people are the ones we hear their names or that are successful in any endeavor, you know? So that would have held me back. And it probably has held me back in other areas. There's a lot of other things that I do, both, you know, professionally. It's kind of a hard question for me to answer when I meet someone, they say, hey, what do you do? It's like, I almost have to send them to a website, because it depends on the day. And I've actually gotten to be okay with being someone that is too diverse to be categorized. I'm fine with that, but it just makes for difficult conversation because it really does depend on, I take on everything as a project. Everything to me is a project. My whole career is just a bunch of projects. So I manage an IT staffing company, and that's a long-term thing. I mean, my partner and I have been doing this for 10 years, but to me, everything is a project, every engagement, every new client. 2 nights ago, I did a concert. It was the first online concert that we did, and charged, for tickets, and had a 4-camera video shoot and a sound engineer. It was like so professional. It went so well. And that was a project, right? I mean, it had a beginning date and an end date, and there's quality measures. And, I move forward with that, and I do it and see how can I do it better next time. And so everything is like a project to me. So I didn't directly answer your question of what's gotten in my way, but I think the reason I'm able to trudge forward without things getting in my way is because I just look at everything as like a short-term project. And so it's almost like a test.
Right.
So there is no fail. There's like, I feel like Silicon Valley has almost, over the last few years, if you read up on the kind of buzzwords and the things that people are talking about on the West Coast, the business people, the investors and all that, they almost fetishize failure. There's a book like Fail Faster, and I totally understand what they're getting at, like don't be afraid of failure. But if you look at everything as a project and you look at everything as a test, then you don't say like, oh, I have 5 failed relationships and 5 failed businesses. It's like, no, I had a test and I figured out I really don't like to do this work, or I'm really not good at this. I need to outsource this next time, or this went really well. This went exactly the way that I wanted it to. Wow, like I'm onto one thing. But if I really step back and look at it, of all my tests, I have a lot of ideas, and most of them are not good. They end up not being good. So I would always get in my own way if I thought of it that way. So it's just a reframing of what success is. Like, this is a test. I'm going to try and do these things. I'm going to figure out what I can, and a small percentage of the time, I'm successful at it.
Yeah, now I'm going to risk putting words in your mouth, so I'll invite you to kind of correct me where I'm off here. First of all, I loved what you did in the answer to your question, because I spotted a few things. One, me, I'm the author of this Law of Attraction book, and here I am asking you a negative question, and you're automatically yourself to turn it into a positive, which I love. So I think that in and of itself, there's something to be said for the fact that your brain, through, I imagine, years of intentional and even unintentional work, has geared you to a point where you're looking at the glass at half full, and you're even answering questions in that context.
I'm really trying to.
That's one thing I spotted. Another thing, again, I'm interpreting you, but it's almost like part of the reason for your success was that you didn't see the limitations that people often see and put up in their way. So without those to become excuses for the ego, because I know we mentioned that a lot in the book, without having those in the way, it basically kind of cleared this path to kind of just step forward, which is what people really need to do. And the other piece that I got is, you're talking about viewing something as a project, even though you didn't word it this way and you might not have even meant it this way. My brain interpreted as like, don't even worry about step 200. Worry about the 5 or 10 steps in front of you, because you can see them. You could do something about it. You can, from a law of attraction
standpoint. That's just how I go about every project. Exactly.
Yeah, and you can also focus more positively on that, because you're not, taking it to like a law of attraction example. Like, the universe has got those steps later on. The stuff that you can't worry about, why do it? Instead, if you let it go and you move forward with confidence and enthusiasm and gratitude, all of a sudden, a lot of those things that you may have had to worry about kind of work themselves out before you even get to that step. So why not just worry about the stuff in front of you?
Well, I will tell you, not to be negative, but first of all, one positive thing I think about just the kind of person that I am, not through any luck. I mean, not through any effort of my own, but I'm kind of a nonconformist anyways. So I'm not a contrarian. So I'm not looking at like, Taylor Swift is popular, so I hate Taylor Swift. It's not just contrary. I'm not going to walk on my hands because everyone else is walking on their feet. But I do question. I've always just questioned everything, and questioning like, is there a better way? Is there another way? Is this a rule? I remember when I first put out a 5-song album on iTunes years ago, and people said, well, isn't an album 10 songs? Like, don't you? And I was like, there's no rules anymore. It made sense that a physical round album that you had to ship across the country and many of them would break, and you were going to sell for X amount of money, that they wouldn't just have 3 songs on them, but people are downloading. There's no rules. Like I just thought of things differently. And part of that is, and again, I'm not giving myself credit. I'm just noticing, I'm observing the way that I am. I am very comfortable with ambiguity. That works for me and it works against me. But the way that it works for me is I am the first person that understands, not just intellectually, but in my bones, when you say the universe knows a million ways to make that happen, don't insist on the how. So if for example, I'm just going to use an easy, dumb example. I want to make a bunch of money. I'm not going to force the universe to make my next song be a hit. And that's how. I'm not romantic about how it happens, right? So I think that just happens to be a lucky part of my personality, that I do the thing you're supposed to do, right? Like I have a positive attitude. I do the visualization for only a short time. And then I work as if no one was in my corner, even though I know the universe is, right?
Yes.
So that part of it, I think, makes it easy. But I will now say this is what's gotten in my way, specifically when it comes to, let's say, doing visualization exercises, which I think is probably the most important thing you can do. And I love that your book has, and all the other content that I've consumed online. I've met Mike Dooley and some of the other people that are fairly well known for this. It's just like, here's the way to do it. Here's steps 1 through 5, like just do it. And they're right, like just do that. And then they'll spend 95% of the time saying, this is why it works. This is how it works. But the actual how-to is a 3x5 card, right?
Yes.
If you're already bought into the concept, it's great to learn more about how it works and why it works. But in the end, it's like, I have a microwave over there. Like I couldn't reproduce that. If I went back in time 500 years, I wouldn't even be able to explain it. But I know what buttons to push, and if it doesn't work, I want to know why it's not working, and I want to know what to do. And so, I've had some issues trying to make this a regular daily ritual over several years of doing this, maybe 10 years. And one of the biggest problems that I had is I understand that we have to put our emotions, right? If you step back, it's like the joy or toxicity of our life is actually mediated by thought, but really it's not thought, it's feeling, right? Your feeling is everything. So everyone that says, I want health, wealth, relationships, friends, whatever, that's not the money or whatever isn't the end goal. It's the feeling that we're going after. So we have to put ourselves in that place. So I understand that intellectually. But for example, years ago, I was in a very toxic, horrible relationship that for some reason I wasn't ready to get out of. And so every day in my visualization, this is what I focused on, is just getting to the other side of that and saying, oh my God, this, I'm so glad all this pressure is off me. But I couldn't do it. It was like, how can I BS myself into feeling something when I know that I don't feel it, when I know that it's not real? And then I would have this argument with myself, like, okay, I watch a movie and I have this visceral reaction when a child dies in the movie, right? But like, I'm an adult. I know that these are all actors. The child's totally fine. It's a story. The story is meant to elicit the emotion, and I'm like hooked into it. Why can't I just do this to myself? I know that's not real. And that wasn't enough, right? So like, it's like your ego gets in the way, just like you explain in so many ways. And you have all these great ways in the book of like getting past the objections of yourself. That's what's going to stop you. And the only thing that I learned to do to overcome that at the time, and now I have like these great techniques from you that I use every day. Time lapse is my favorite. I think it's probably the most important because it just gets past all the ego stuff where you don't feel like you're trying to talk yourself into anything that's not true. And but the only way I did it was I've always felt that the questions that we ask, whether it's about your business or your life or your relationship or whatever, are so important. Because if you it's not just think positive versus think negative. I've learned that if you say things like, why does this always happen to me? Why do I always date girls like this? Why do I always fail? It doesn't matter that that's a rhetorical question. I think your unconscious mind goes to work on the answer right away. And it's never going to be a good answer. It's always going to be because you're not worthy, because you're not smart enough. So you might as well just ask better questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I have this very short list of just better questions, right? And so a couple of them that I've used that are totally simple and they really apply to as many situations, I think, as possible. One of them is just when something happens. This isn't about visualizing, but just to get my head on right. What's great about this? There's almost always something great. I live in Detroit. It gets freezing cold here. Most of us complain about the winter. What's great about this? You know what? Like, I have a great house. I have a fireplace. I have a hot tub, hot chocolate. I could name 20 things that's great about winter, right? Instead of complaining. So it's just that question, a question like that. The one that I used when I was in this really bad relationship was I found this mantra that I've used since, and this is the one that I think applies to so many things. I visualized myself calling a friend of mine who had taken me out to dinner and basically performed an exorcism and said, like, you got to get out of this relationship. You're not even yourself. You're not funny. You're not fun. You're like a depressed person. Like, you got to get out of this. For some reason, I wasn't ready to get out of it. So I picked a mantra that didn't force the universe to have me go through a breakup even, right? And the words that I used were, it's so much better now. So I pictured calling my friend Ava. I mean, literally, like picking up the phone, looking at her number, calling and saying, thank you so much for finally, doing this intervention. It's so much better now. Wow. And for some reason, that let my body be tricked into it because it wasn't forcing a certain outcome. It was just trying to evoke the emotion that would be there if it were so much better, right? Which could mean the relationship turned around and it was so much better. It didn't, by the way, but that's okay. And it was so much better. And I actually ended up making that call to her. It was like one of those moments in my life where I was like, I can't believe that this came true. I was driving to this girl's house that, picked me up at the gym and was making me dinner that night. And I wasn't used to people doing things for me. It was like, wow, it's a whole new life. I got to call Ava. It is so much better now. Like the very thing that I visualized happened and the very feeling was there, right? So the way that I've gotten over the trick yourself, because that's always stopped me because of the logical part of my brain saying, what do you mean what it feels like to have no money problems? You have money problems. Like, who are you trying to trick? The way to get over that for me was just to find that mantra. And the one that I've been using lately, whether I'm visualizing or whether it's just me going about my day and noticing that I'm having negative thoughts about something, is this question. What would be ideal, or what would it look like if it were ideal? So I might have this nagging thought like, God, relationships are so complicated. But what would it look like if it weren't complicated? Yeah, like, God, it's so hard to do business with. I'm doing business with the government right now, with the federal government. It's been 2 years to try and put a deal together. Lots and lots of money, lots and lots of time. I think it's about to come through, but I don't know. And I always have, God, it's so complicated. It's so time consuming to do business with them. But what would it look like? Like, what would it feel like if it were effortless, right? Like, what would be ideal? And just framing it that way, for me, pushes my ego out of the way of standing there and saying, oh, yeah, but it's not easy. Yep, you're right. It's not easy. You're absolutely right. Relationships are complicated. But what would it feel like, So that's the thing that I've been using to get past it.
So there's so, like, first of all, that's an amazing answer. There's so much to unpack. And it's funny, as you were saying it, my brain's like, okay, there's this, like, so first of all, I wanted to, I guess, highlight for you when you said, wait, the beginning of this, like, there are no rules, because I think when you said there are no rules, and you said that you love ambiguity. I think from not only from a law of attraction perspective, but a success to any kind of level perspective, but bringing it to like even the law of attraction, I think it's good because some people, they have to have it a certain way, and they're really worried about the specifics, and they're worried about the rules, and they're worried about following the steps, that if they do something in any different way, as if it's not going to work, even though like your way is the right way. I also, I really love the fact that you were talking about asking better questions. And that mantra of, also, by the way, again, because I'm like rattling off the list, I might have to steal that whole microwave example because that's brilliant. I'll
Which
credit you
one?
when I do it. When you talk about like a microwave, all you want to do is like push the
Oh,
buttons. You don't
yeah.
care how it works. Like,
Yeah.
does it
It's
work? That's
interesting
the
to
real
know how
question.
it works, but in
Yeah.
the end, I want to know, what do I do to make it work? And then if it's not working, and that's what's so great about the book, is here's what's going to happen when you press the buttons. There's 20 things that are going to happen. They're all from the ego. This is why that happens. But never mind that. Here's what you do. Here's how you get past it. Like, that's what's so great.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's amazing. That's why I thought like, oh, this microwave example is perfect. But also the like, it's so much better now. I
Mhm.
love, so here's what I love about it. And here's actually what I love about the law of attraction. You're giving that in the context of like even like a visualization. And
Mhm.
you're right, it could be a visualization, but also it could be a scripting method. Like my brain's like, oh, well, I have to credit Steve with the, it's so much better now scripting method. Meaning like, for those, obviously I know a lot of people are watching this have read the book already, like rather like make sure you put the words "it's so much better now" in the beginning, the middle, the end, whatever, as
Mhm.
you're scripting, and then your brain's going to come up with all these reasons and all these ways of describing that ideal
Yeah.
life. And
Right.
also that question, like what is the I, and I'm butchering, like what's the
Mhm.
ideal way of
What
this?
would it look like if it were, yeah. Well, first of
Exactly.
all,
I
what
mean,
would be ideal for you, right? I mean, you're negotiating your way through life, not
and what a
necessarily
wonderful,
money, right?
yeah, and what a
What would be
wonderful question
ideal?
to ask yourself before you're scripting or before you're visualizing or even before you're doing
Mm.
like the time lapse method, which by the way is my absolute favorite as well.
Oh,
Like
is that right?
that's for me that method, the time lapse. About 12 years ago, when I had a situation, and I mean I'm not sure how much of my content you've seen, but I had a situation where I lost a relationship and my business all in the same week. And I kind of like made a comeback where I was just like stubborn and indignant. I'm like, I don't care how this is going to work, why,
Yeah.
how, whatever. I'm just going to use all
Yeah.
these methods. It
Yeah.
was the time lapse that I personally attribute to resulting 4 months later in me making more money in my life than I'd ever had in any point before because of the dynamic of that method. It flows so well. So whenever I hear someone
Mm.
really resonates, I'm like,
Yeah.
this is so awesome because I know, especially like a guy like you who's already massively successful, like, oh my God, imagine the things are you going to do to inject momentum and
Mhm.
just so much more positivity into what you're doing already. So
And that method, by the way, that's both of our favorites. I think will help anyone who's watching who's very. I'm probably like I'm creative and I'm both a feeler and a thinker and like I'm kind of right in the middle, but I'm very like science-y. So I don't just accept everything that doesn't make sense to me, and I do tend to analyze things, right? So if I thought that this law was actually BS and it was just a bunch of confirmation bias all over the place, I wouldn't be able to get into it. I have to know for myself that I believe that it's a real thing, right? Um, but what makes it difficult is the ego, and you go into the book of the I don't know how many ways, but there's so many ways that it will try and stop us from changing anything because change is inherently dangerous and it just wants to keep us alive. And obviously we're alive now, no matter how bad life is now, we're alive. So don't change anything, right? Like
yeah.
that's the inner parent that we have, and it's like the annoying roommate in your head when you want to be more. You want to be, when I think of health, I don't think of health as just the absence of disease, right? When I think of a relationship, I don't just think of like I'm I'm standing in relationship to someone and it's not terrible. It would be like a girl saying, "My new boyfriend is great. He never beats me." It's like that, but is that your level? That's what you want, or do you want it to be exciting? So when I think of health, I think of my little line, my mantra is lean, athletic, peak performing body. Now I'm close to 50 years old. I'm pretty good shape for my age, but it's like even when I'm 70, whatever lean and athletic and peak performing for my body is, that's what I'm going to maintain. That's what I'm going to be. I'm not comparing it to someone else. That's what I'm feeling. That's what I'm thinking. So getting back to the point about this, for the people that are skeptics, and I kind of consider myself a healthy skeptic, who say, I'm not, let's say I'm a person who's having big money problems. My cell phone is just ringing off the hook and it's all bill collectors that I owe tons of money to. And of course, what does that do to me, right? Every time the phone rings, like, oh, here I am, I'm in this place. I'm going to sit for 5 minutes and imagine what it feels like to just, go online and book a vacation and charter a jet. It's like, no, your ego is going to stop you from doing that. If you have any of that logical part of your brain, right? It's going to go, your phone's right there and it's still ringing. But what's brilliant about that method is that it isn't a trick. I mean, it's like if you start the time-lapse method, let's say you have 3 and 2. So you have 3 things that you're truly already grateful about, right? You are conjuring up that emotion, which is all that matters. And then your body's there. And now your ego's backed off because it's real. There's nothing fake. It's not a placebo, right? But then you put the placebo in. I don't know if you look at it as a placebo, but in a way it's similar to me. Yeah. And it works, right? Placebo is known to work. And then you insert the things that aren't true right now in the moment, but your ego's already out of the way because you've gotten through the things that are true, right? That for me, I wish I would have known that a decade ago. I'd stop myself. I mean, I would do 5-minute, I remember I would just like in my old house, I would kneel by the fire. I would set a timer for 5 minutes. And a lot of times at the end of it, I would think that was a waste of time. Like I'm still upset and I haven't changed anything and I'll try it again tomorrow, But I probably would have been able to get by a lot of those sessions by just inserting things that were true.
Yes.
So that's why I think it's so powerful for everyone.
Thank you for that acknowledgement. And, it's interesting because I don't know how far this interview right here will ever go and how many people like are already on board with law of attraction, how many people aren't. But the beauty is like you could use different terms. I mean, the whole point of the time lapse is whether you're injecting a level of certain frequency or vibration, which is, law of attraction speak, or you're just saying you're adding or boosting or injecting a level of certainty and confidence that's accessing your subconscious mind, which knows how to take the wheel for you. So it's kind of like the beauty of it is,
that's a good way of saying it.
It is a law of attraction thing, but it doesn't have to be even limited to that. It's all about giving yourself the tools. And I always say to people like, listen, Olympic athletes, before they win those gold medals, in their mind, they first go through winning it time after time after time in meditation, because the subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between perceived and real. And again, amazing. Whether it's connecting to the universe, if you believe that, which I do, or it's steering the wheel for you, which I believe and I do, or both of them are a combination. Either way, it works. And since it works, why even worry? Again, ambiguity be damned, and who cares?
Yeah, you're right. Well, right? And so for people that aren't so comfortable with ambiguity, and also for people that are more skeptical than you and I, right? And would require a little bit more, like they feel like, well, I don't know if all that stuff's true, and therefore I'm not going to do any of this stuff. What I would say to that is, because again, like I'm a fairly healthy skeptic, and I'm doing this. But what I would say to them is that first of all, if you spend 5 minutes a day conjuring up the emotion of gratitude, nothing bad will happen, right? So at the very least, you're not hurting yourself. Even if all of this is a joke, you're not hurting yourself. But here's the other thing, and this is hard science. This isn't like, this is nothing spooky. This is a real thing. This is the RAS, reticular activating system. It's the part of your brain that notices a red car everywhere as soon as you decide you're going to buy a red car or whatever. We all have examples of this, right? Just putting yourself in a state of gratitude, or doing a silly thing where you wake up and you look at 5 things and you say, I'm grateful for that chair, and I'm grateful for this laptop that I was able to afford, and I'm grateful for my family. And you just go there, even if a handful of times, you are going to notice more things to be grateful for, whether or not the universe is helping you. You could be totally agnostic about that, right?
Yes.
And it's still a helpful thing, right? We know that and then you'll notice more of the things that are Again, it's like the difference between leaving your house and believing you're an unlucky person who's going to have a bad day or a lucky person who's going to have a great day. Like either way, you're right. And you're going to see, again, like law of attraction, anything spooky, totally aside, you're going to hit a red light and go, oh, see, I hit a red light. I'm great. But the other person's going to hit the same number of red lights, but they're going to notice the green lights that they did go through. They could have been stopped at those. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or they might even be like, I hit this red light that's probably keeping me from a traffic jam or something.
Yeah, there you go. Right. So even the change in thought, that is a scientific thing that you can point to, and you don't even have to evoke anything spooky, right?
Yes.
That's just what I would say to people that are more skeptical about it, right? Like they need to know what's going on in the microwave before they decide they're going to press the buttons, right?
Yeah, perfect example. Now, I know we only got so much time here. I did want to ask you something. We kind of began this conversation before we hopped on, but I know that you basically, you'll please stop me from butchering this, but you basically took the feeling of a skill that you were already familiar with, and you almost like translated that to help you learn a new skill. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yeah, that's a perfect way of putting it, actually. Yeah, and this is a kind of I don't know if it's a visualization exercise, because to be honest, I wish that I had the skill of being able to close my eyes and see visions vividly, but I don't. But one thing I'm somehow able to do, it's probably through some kind of thinking, but I just don't see perfect visions and color and detail, is I'm able to conjure up the emotion. And that's really all that matters anyways, right? Is just to feel the strong emotion of whatever it is. So I am a total lunatic who's obsessed with human performance. I always have been. So I do a lot of things. I've gotten to a pretty decent level at a lot of things. I've been playing tennis since I was a kid. I got a scholarship to play in college. I've been doing martial arts since I was a kid. I've been, training with very high level MMA people. I've been doing music, not as long, but I taught myself how to play piano. I still have never taken a lesson. I don't know how to read music. So I've always just been obsessed with people that are successful or high performers in any way. And so because there are a couple things that I know how to do well, and I know what it feels like when I'm doing them, I can translate that. So I've been playing piano now for like 20 years, and I just totally taught myself, like just out of nowhere. The skill that I have is I have a good ear. It's not really music. Like I can mimic people and I can do accents. And so it's really just an ear. It's not a music thing. So I can mimic singers and I can mimic sound. So now I'm teaching myself how to play guitar. And guitar, I think, is difficult. But I use a couple of the concepts that I use to teach anybody anything. One of them is like the 80-20 rule, right? So you want to learn how to play guitar. Okay, when are you done? Like that's a lifelong thing. Well, I know specifically what I want to do. I want to be able to play 100 songs, right? And sing. What do I have to do? Basically learn 5 chords. Actually, 4 chords you do 100, 5 chords you probably do 300 songs. So all I'm going to do is learn these chords and get really good at them. Well, when I start, like, half the strings aren't, it just sounds terrible. I know what it's supposed to sound like. Then I get into it and I'm a little bit better every day because I only spend a little bit of time. So I started doing this thing where before I picked it up, I evoked that feeling that I know really well because I've spent hundreds of hours performing, practicing, even though I never call it practicing, but just playing the piano. And I just know what it feels like, even to be on TV or in front of thousands of people and just not have to look down. I know what I'm doing. It's like this relaxed arrogance almost. Not arrogance like I'm so great, but arrogance like I'm going to make this thing my own. Like I know what I'm doing. I know
there's nothing to worry about.
Exactly. Yeah. And even more than nothing to worry about, it's a very positive, like I own this instrument. I don't know how to put it into words, but it's a feeling. And I know what that feeling is like. And so I evoke that feeling before I pick up the guitar to practice, where it's just like, this is so effortless for me. You watch someone do something that they've been doing for years. Like if you learn how to dance and you watch someone that's been doing merengue for 20 years, it just looks effortless. You're like, oh my God. I watch my friends play guitar and, they could be asleep and just God, it's effortless. But I know what that feels like in another context. So I evoke that emotion, I pick it up, and I actually feel like I'm doing a better job. And even if I'm not, it'll help me because I'll practice longer, right? I'll do it longer. And so to me, the real trick or the most important thing is, like I always say, knowledge by itself isn't that, like people say knowledge is power. I don't really agree with that, right? Because you could have a whole library and know how to read, but just not read anything. So the knowledge doesn't matter. It's the application of it, right? So, so to be able to do that stuff and be able to do it well, I conjure up this emotion, and then it gives me long-term sustainable motivation. Because again, even if I'm not actually getting, I'm probably getting tiny increments better every day, but even if I'm not, the most important thing is I feel like I'm getting better,
Yes.
which means I'm not going to quit tomorrow. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to tell you I'm learning how to play guitar, not I was learning how to play guitar, but it was too hard, you know?
So I love, first of all, there's so much to unpack, but the two things that really pop out, well, number one is, this is almost like a modified version of like a walking meditation by how I describe it. It's like, and again, I mean, you did this before you ever met me, so let's not credit the book here, but just to put it in the context of people that have read the book and are looking for a way, like, how can I crystallize this into my life? But also, you kind of unfolded a strategy of mine where the whole point of this is the reason that the ego can kind of sneak in and get people to stop with the methods or to stop any habit that's been working in their life or will work in their life is there's this lack of hope or lack of result or something missing that they become impatient about. And what you've essentially done, as how I hear it and interpret it, is you've found a way to inject a level of enthusiasm and confidence and reassurance that, no, this is all good on a small or a large level, just enough to maintain it where it doesn't feel like you're running in circles, and it feels like you're creating something, you're succeeding in some way, shape, or form. And I love how you strategically, almost intuitively did that for yourself so that you can carry it over into the skill and any other skill that you want to do.
And what I think about in everything is so, like when I'm practical and I'm thinking about business and I'm creating goals for myself, they're very specific, right? So, and this is something that I've taught in, I do keynote speeches and I talk about really just upgrading your skills, right? And one of the most important things is just to be so specific about the goal, where, for example, people will say, I'm going to learn how to speak Japanese, right? Well, it's one of those things where it's like, that's great, but how do you know when you get there? So start with something really specific, like I'm going to learn how to introduce myself in Japanese in social and business settings. That's number one. It turns out that you need to learn 12 words in order to do that. So if you spend 15 minutes a day doing 12 words, you'll remember that the rest of your life. Cool. What's the next step? The next step is I want to be able to have a 5-minute conversation in Japanese, just for example, right? To ask someone about themselves and tell them about me, because that's probably what's going to happen when I meet someone, right? There's first 5 minutes of a conversation with strangers is scripted probably in any language, roughly. So you know what that's going to look like. That really feels like progress too, because the minute you meet a Japanese person, you've already spent hours hardcore with 12 words. There's only 12, like that's it. Formal or informal, that's all you need to learn. And then you've already spent hours with the back and forth because you know how to ask the question, you know how to answer the question. And if you were taking a Japanese course and you 6 months in, you had learned all the vowels and you'd learned how to say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and all the colors and all the months. It's like, what are the odds that that's going to come up and you're going to feel confident now because you were in a conversation with someone and they happened to say Wednesday, pink ashtray. It's like you're just learning arbitrary things.
Yeah.
So when I look at goals for myself in terms of skill and outcome or business objectives or whatever, they're very specific. And what I've learned how to do, and I think it's being comfortable with ambiguity, is I get myself out of the really specific. To be honest, like I don't care if I make X million dollars or not. I really don't care about the number. To me, it's just abundance. And abundance to me is personal. So it doesn't have to be the same as you. I don't want or need a bunch of cars or anything, right? So that's totally fine if someone does. So to me, it's just abundance. So when I get to the end of that, just like when I get to the end of some skill that I want to have, and I'm specific by saying, I'm going to learn how to, introduce myself in social or business settings in this language, and that's my first goal. And then I do it. And then I talk with people and I go, wow, I made progress. The way that I do that in the kind of law of attraction realm is I get really specific with how I will feel when I've achieved that. And I skip way past the achieve. So you talked about in sports, right? Like athletes might visualize several times, like catching the winning touchdown pass or something, right? Mm-hmm. For me, what I would do is if I were in that position, I would get way past all the physical stuff because I don't trust my ego. So I would get past, because I think if I visualize catching the touchdown pass for 5 minutes, I'm probably going to drop the ball a couple times, because my ego's right there. Like, hey, you're not perfect, dude, So what I would do is I would picture myself in the locker room after the game with cold champagne pouring down the back of my jersey, slipping on the Super Bowl ring, and like, how does that feel? And it's something that it just bulldozes all the rest because you got there, right? Yeah. So that's what I try and get to really specifically. If you get to that goal, that first goal, however big or small, that just gives you so much confidence that this thing works for you because you were really specific. I want to have a 5-minute conversation. Okay, after a month of doing whatever I do, I just had a 5-minute conversation. Wow, I feel like this, right? So that's how I think of, I get really specific, but not with an outcome. I don't have a person in mind when I think of relationships. I don't have an amount of money in mind when I think of money. I just think of like, how lucky that I have an overabundance of money that I can do something like this.
Yeah. Right? I love about that is like you set yourself up for success through micro successes that are within, that you feel within your reach. Like, I'm going to learn these 4 or 5 chords. I'm going to learn these 12 words. I'm going to, do a meditation or visualization for 15 or 30 straight days or whatever it might be. And the thing is also what I love is everyone has their own level of specificity that works for them. Your example might be perfect for people, or it might not be. Like for me, like one of my goals is 1 million YouTube subscribers, and I'm not at 1,000 yet. And people are like, well, what does that mean? Well, it's like 1 million subscribers could mean 20 million people are actually looking, because your number of subscribers isn't actually your number of audience.
Absolutely.
It's like, so Andrew, how's that number helping you? I'm like, well, for me, all it is like a northern star to kind of look to as I push through, but it isn't just 1 million. Like first, like, I'm not sure when this is going to go up, probably before 1,000, but who knows how fast I'll go. But like, well, first I need 1,000, and then I need 5,000, and then 10, then 25, then 50, then 100. Like, I'm going in micro steps. So I kind of like, I see the far thing, but if it feels too impossible, well, let me work with the steps in front of
chunks,
me. Other people might be like, well, I can go to 10,000. I don't have to do 1,000. I can see 10,000. Like,
that makes sense.
Works for you, awesome. You know, whether it's 5 chords or 20 chords, you tell how much I know about guitars, right? Even though I'd love to learn myself. It's like, it's whatever works for you. And I love how you've intuitively set yourself up for micro successes. I also loved how you basically, through the champagne example, that's like the 10 minutes ago method, where it's like, rather than
that's exactly what I couldn't remember the name of it, but
it's like, I have trouble feeling what it's like to feel like, okay, let's put you 10 minutes in the future where you don't have a fixed emotion that you feel like you have to get to, that you feel like you're going to be screwing up. So I love that. So we're almost out of time here. In fact, I'm probably pulling you a little too far here. I did want to ask you, because one, well, I hope you'll share this with your audience, because I think you're brilliant, and I think what you're saying here would be great for them. But I know for a fact, because this is going on my YouTube channel, I know that my audience is going to hear this. And I also know that at this level of growth in the channel, the majority of people have read the book. So speaking to you, who's been a success before the book, but also recognizes certain things from the book that are important, like, what do you think is the most important lesson or lessons or takeaway from the book that you think people that are already familiar with it and they're trying to get good at these things, what in your opinion is the best, most important lesson or takeaway from the book for them that they should like kind of lean into?
Well, I'm a very practical person, so I'm intellectually curious. So to the microwave example, I'm actually interested to see how the microwave works. But in the end, um, if you gave me the choice between learning the inner workings of a microwave or reading a 3x5 card of just like what buttons to push to make it work, I'll take the 3x5 card. You know, I'm intellectually curious, so I like to learn both. And because I'm curious, I've read so much material on this that, and most of it speaks to me. You know, some authors or some means of writing are not, just don't, I don't connect with them, and they connect well with other people. Some I do, but they're all kind of ethereal, and they're not the how-to. They're not like what buttons to push. So to me, I think the most important takeaway is that hits both categories. It's like, it's the why and the what to do about it. You know, what's funny is, so I've written a couple books. One of them is called Why Technology Recruiting is Broken and What to Do About It. And that's exactly what, you know, it is titled that on purpose, just like your book is brilliant, because it's like, that's exactly what it is. You can just ask me, what's wrong with it? What should we do about it? And that's kind of how I look at things that I want to improve, right?
Mm.
So what's wrong with the way we're doing it is this. Okay, what do I do about it? Well, you do this. That's the question you answer in the book. So you're showing how the microwave works, but you're saying, look, when you try and press the buttons, there's this thing called an ego that's going to stop you. And here are the many ways it's going to stop you from pressing the buttons. But I have a counterattack. I have a plan for all of that. You pick the one that works for you, or pick the 5 that work for you. So to me, the practical, I can only take so much why and what, and then I'm like, okay, tell me what to do about it. You know, that's what I like about it. It's funny because like I've always been interested in language, and when I was in college, I took an elective class called linguistics. And it was so interesting to me for some reason. I just geeked out on it. It was like, linguistics is like the study of how humans actually talk, not how we're supposed to talk, not grammar, has nothing to do with grammar, but I was just like, wow, around the world, we talk like there's so much nitty gritty about, so all of the professors that taught, I was like, this is so cool. So how many languages do you speak? Oh, I just speak English. And I just thought, what a waste. Like, you know all this stuff about language and you just don't care to use any of it. You're just teaching about language, right? That's how I look at a lot of the books that don't get into the details of like, here's what's going to happen in life, right? Here, this is going to be the objection, or this is going to be something that gets in your way, and here's the strategy for dealing with it. So just the fact, I never thought of it before I read your book, that the fact that the ego is exactly what it is that gets in our way. And the reason that it gets in our way is, I think when a lot of people think of ego, they think of in the term that we usually use it in, like that guy has an ego, he thinks he's better than other people. It's not the overindulged sense of self that you're talking about. It's like this ancient thing that we have evolved to protect us, right? It's the ancient roommate in our head that's just trying to keep us safe. That's the explanation, right? Why do you need $1 million? You're safe now. I'm going to stop you from doing that. It makes so much sense that every time that I've been, you know, stopped in trying to do this, that's the perfect explanation for what it is. So I loved learning that that's what it is. And I especially love learning what to do about it.
I love it. So just so you know, if people are interested in learning more about you, I assume steveacho.com is the best way for them to do so.
Yep.
Awesome. And you know, I would say I'm going to put that in the notes in the description of the YouTube video here.
Oh,
I'd
thanks.
encourage people to check it out, if nothing else, to hear your voice, because I checked you out before, and you sir have I mean, you don't need me to tell you. I mean, 50 million streams and sales, but I love your voice, man.
Thank you.
It's like velvet gold. I really appreciate like it's always cool because I think it's interesting to do the reverse. I think whenever you see somebody play basketball or sing a song or program something, and you see them in their area of genius,
Yeah.
your brain, we label people and we put them in a little box, and we don't understand that they have these other, so they're geniuses in so many other ways. And I think it's so cool for, I guess, my audience to find out about in this way, they're going to hear this version of Steve and then that. Whereas like so a lot of other people hear that and they might not have even heard this conversation, which again,
Right.
I hope you'll have the opportunity to share with
Sure.
people that listen to you, because I
Yeah.
would love for the people that know you for your music and love you for your music, I'd love for them to hear this level of insight that you have, that you've shared today.
Thank you.
And I'm so grateful that you're here. I guess the only other question I have for you before we close things out is, and this is going to be anything, but if there's like one piece of advice that you'd want to kind of like as go away with here for people to take away with them from this conversation, or even not from this conversation, what's the one thing you might want to share with people listening?
I would say that whatever it is that you're trying to improve in your life, to get really specific with what it is and actually move towards it in a way that you feel like you're seeing progress. I just think that there is nothing, and that's so that just applies to every part of life. It doesn't have to be a business thing. It doesn't have to be a money or relationship thing. I just think that the most powerful source of inspiration and motivation doesn't come from outside. It comes from your belief in what's possible. And there's nothing, not Tony Robbins, not your father, not somebody rooting for you. There's nothing that gives you sustainable motivation like feeling like you're better this week than you were last week in any way. So getting to that as quickly as you can so that you feel that sense of confidence and that inspiration and that motivation will keep you going so that you actually will make huge changes.
Steve Acho, thank you for confirming how gifted you are in many different ways here, including, again, what I think is a really insightful conversation. I think there's so many wonderful takeaways. I hope people watching this video right now will scroll back to the beginning and rewatch and kind of cherry pick certain pieces, because there was so much, and I did my best to highlight them each time you gave such massive, awesome answers. But there's so much gold there. I'm so grateful, one, for you just for reading my book, for reaching out, for being the awesome example that you are to the world and in the world, and for taking time out of your day to chat with me and share this with my audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for writing the book and for doing this. I think you have a lot to share with a lot of people. So congratulations on the 1 million that's coming.